courses, and other resources, all of which will be covered today. With that said, Margaret Sheridan will provide a review of FCAB and Grand Challenges. An example of an FCAB short course will be presented by Alyssa Johnson. Denise Devine will discuss the CFPB resources, followed by Julie Berkermeyer, who will describe social work curricular approaches and resources. And then we'll have a wrap-up and give instructions about the evaluation. So with that, enjoy the webinar, and I will turn it over to Margaret.
Thanks, Gina, and welcome everyone. We're very pleased that you could join us this afternoon for this second webinar that we're doing in partnership with the Council on Social Work Education and the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. We have some really exciting resources to share with you today. We would, welcome comments and questions as we go along. So please, we may not answer them immediately, but we will be taking notes and try to get back to you. Before we begin, though, I really would like to express our appreciation to the National Endowment for Financial Education, NEFI, who's supported the survey on household finances in social work education. This is a survey many of you filled out. Thank you very much. We should have the findings from that research coming out towards the end of this semester, beginning of next. We'll be presenting at APM, and we haven't heard yet from SOAR, but hopefully we'll see you there. So let me just say a little bit about this work. We've been partnering with CSWE, with CFPB, with NASW, and colleagues at the Financial Social Work Initiative at the University of Maryland and other schools of social work across the country, including HBCUs and tribal colleges and universities, to restore economic and financial issues as a central focus of social work research and practice. Historically, this is what social workers have done, and given the current conditions of so many families and communities, we're convinced that this is something we must do again. We've covered the theory and goals of what we call financial capability and asset building, FCAB, at some length in prior webinars and publications. So we're not going to review that again. Let me just say that for those of you who were not participating in the prior events, it's FCAB, or the Financial Capability and Asset Building Initiative, is based on social work's person and environment perspective. It captures the idea that to manage and develop individuals and families in contemporary society, they require access to financial and economic opportunities at the same time as having and gaining the ability to understand the increasingly complex financial environment that we all live in. We call this financial capability. It's not a purely individual idea. Instead, it captures the interaction between individuals and their environment. It's about what people know and their skills, but it's also about what their environment makes possible, what real opportunities exist that make it possible for them to make good financial decisions and act in their best financial interests. So it dovetails well with social work's perspective in the person and environment, and this is the sort of foundation of the work that so many of us have been working on. This idea is so important that the Academy of Social Work and Social Welfare adopted FCAB as one of the 12 grand challenges for social work a couple of years ago. And many of you, many of our colleagues have joined that effort. We'll be meeting at APM and at SWR, and we invite you to join us. Please let us know if you would like to participate in those various events that will be happening at that time. Meanwhile, FCAB researchers are generating resources for social work educators, including a textbook that will come out next spring, research articles, curricula, and more. And we will talk about some of that work that has been generated today. So I would like to just to pass this along now to Lissa Johnson, who's up next. She's going to share experiences teaching a short course on FCAB to social work students at the graduate level. Thanks, Lissa.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Lissa Johnson, and I'm going to walk us through a short course that Gina McClendon, who's the moderator of this call today, and I have been teaching for the past 2 semesters, and will be teaching again next semester. This is a short course. I'm going to walk through the course description, some curriculum tools, and exercises, and then provide you some student reflections from homework that students did, and then some feedback from students on the course evaluation. So we'll just walk through the whole course in a very brief amount of time. Sorry, okay. So the title of this short course was Helping Low-Income Clients Navigate Household Finances. As the title conveys, it was a lot of focus on direct work with social work students working with clients. But as part of what Margaret Shredden mentioned earlier, we also take a systems perspective and include that in the course as well, and I'll talk more about that. The course is a 1-credit elective skills lab, and it was 5 3-hour classes. The format we included was lecture, discussion, practice exercises, some interactive activities, and then students did weekly homework and then a final paper or group project. The curriculum was developed with materials from an FCAB curriculum we developed here at the Center for Social Development, which has evolved into the textbook that Margaret mentioned, which will be coming out soon, which provides a much more detailed and comprehensive set of information. We also have used tools from the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau's Your Money, Your Goals toolkit, and that's been very useful in providing, allowing us to use some really interesting interactive activities and practice exercises. We also have asked students, of course, to read some associated research articles. So the content of this course is 5 different areas. The first one, as you see on the screen, is Introduction to FCAB. And in that, we cover the theoretical framework of what is FCAB. That is much more detailed in the first webinar, and so you can go and take a look at that from our website as well. We also talk about, in the introduction, we take the person and environment approach and talk about how the distribution of resources and related policies and practices can affect financial participation and wealth building, especially how the discriminatory practices and policies towards women and minorities have generational effects and show up today. So, in other words, in this class, we do a lot of hands-on, but we also at the individual level, but we also talk about the systemic element as well. We then move to the financial building blocks, which is information about financial products and services, both mainstream and alternative services, and then go right into the forms of income, expenses, income statements, balance sheets, budgeting, managing cash flow, and then talking about taxes, credit, and debt, and also different kinds of public benefits, which is also included in the social work curriculum generally. In our third area, we talk about building and protecting assets, including insurance, estate planning, and especially in today's world, identity theft. The fourth area is FCAB-related organizations and policies, such as the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, who's with us today, and also exposing students to other kinds of organizations that are really FCAB-related, that are very common in our community, such as housing organizations, credit counseling, tax preparation sites, domestic violence programs, healthcare, and others. And that brings us into how the social worker's role in FCAB practice and how that's integrated with a lot of the community organizations and other work that is already going on out there. So when we get to the practice tools, we start out by initially engaging the students in one of two ways. One is asking students to think about their first memory of money. And this gets into a really interesting discussion about the messages people had as they were growing up, thinking about money, part of the financial socialization aspect of how we think about money, and that quickly leads into the values that people place on money and how people use their resources. And that then, those value judgments are then addressed throughout the rest of the course in thinking about how that might show up when talking with clients. The second way of initially engaging students would be a What Do You Know quiz, which I developed. It's 10 questions, just some quick questions about what people may or may not know, some obvious, some less obvious. So 3 examples we have up on the screen here are what's the difference between simple interest and compound interest? What's the FICO score? And then the range of the FICO score is between what and what numbers. These are the kinds of information that clients will need to know as they review their credit scores moving forward. So I would ask if anybody knows the answers, but we'll move on and we can come back to it if you have a question about that later. Okay, moving on. In terms of working with the clients, we follow that process by what we call Meet the Families. We use case studies to follow families throughout the course. This is especially showing up, is especially helpful in the textbook that will be coming out, which has a much more in-depth talking about different families and the different kinds of issues that might arise within a family and the context in which they live their lives and how policies and organizations interact with them. As we move through that, we then talk about having the money conversation. This is a little bit harder than I think people realize. It's how do you begin to have that conversation? We have practice dialogues that we have students interact with each other and talk about what might be a right way of saying something or maybe not quite so right way, some judgments that show up in how we have that kind of conversation. Another way to have the money conversation, the Your Money, Your Goals has a financial assessment that you can do with a client, which is very helpful to get the conversation started. One of the other tools that we use is an exercise called Wants versus Needs versus Obligations. Again, this is in the Your Money, Your Goals toolkit, and it's a way of getting people up and interacting. It's a way to vote with your body. So you have different sheets around the room, and the want is what you can survive without. The need is what you cannot survive without. And the obligation is what you are obligated or ordered to pay. So then, as the instructor, we would call out different items and ask people to vote on whether it's a want, a need, or an obligation. For example, how would you think about dog food? Some people would call that a want, some people would call that a need, and it really generates some interesting discussion again about values and how people think about using their resources. Bottled water is another one that gets a good rise, and cigarettes is also another good one. And there are different, we go through a whole list and have people think about that. Another tool we use is we ask the students to obtain and then review their credit report. And in our class, we go over the credit report and explain the different parts of it. As we know, this is especially important now with the increasing online security breaches that we are having. The last one is the client budget. We do income statements. We also do expenses, savings, and pulling all that together with public benefits to look at what a client's budget might be and how to balance that cash flow. One of the tools that is in the Your Money, Your Goals, which has been particularly effective, is looking at cash flow by week rather than by month. Oftentimes, I think we think about doing budgets, monthly budgets, but when you really look at the cash flow within a given month, we find that there might be some positives and negatives in terms of when the monies come in and when bills come in at different times. So while you might have something at the end of the month where you be a net positive, because of the way the monies flow in and out, you could end up being in a negative. So it's really helped to identify where those shortfalls might occur and how to adjust your spending accordingly. The other sample exercise we do is called the Problem Debt Quiz, and this was adapted from the Foundation for Credit Counseling, and this is a 20-question, and I'm just giving you three of the sample statements in here, and it's another good way to open the money conversation or to have as part of an assessment with your client, thinking about whether I have any debt issues or credit issues. So the first one, I normally pay only the minimum amount due on my credit cards, or I skip paying bills some months or pay them late, or losing my job would result in an immediate financial crisis. So it may not be that any one answer of yes is problem, but it's something for social workers to look through and to discuss with the client as they think about these things. Okay, so now I want to move on to the reflections. Oh, no, sorry, one more. Working with organizations, I mentioned that we also do a little bit on the meso and macro level, and incorporating that, we do some discussion and some lecture on this, but then as part of their group project or paper at the end, we would ask them to think about the organizations and policies that we've talked about through the course. So on the group project, for example, we might ask them as the first part is to complete an assessment and an intervention plan for the case that they have been following, but then also ask them to conduct some research about a practice or policy aspect that relates to that case related to the FCAB. We also, in our paper, we might ask them to identify an FCAB-related policy or organization, and this could come up again in a family case study, and ask them to learn more about it and make recommendations for expanding the benefits it could offer to individuals, families, or communities, whether as through a program or through a policy. So I'm going to move on to the student reflections. Sorry, I'll go back. A little temperamental. Under student reflections, we ask the students to do homework every week, and in their homework they had to track spending 1 week. They had to have a money conversation with someone, a friend, relative, fiance, spouse, and then on the third week they had to obtain their credit report. So, and then we asked them to write a reflection about their experience with that. So and these comments reflect a lot of what students said. One was on tracking spending. This was a point made about being less judgmental of others. So this one individual wrote, many one-time or unforeseen expenses that I needed to make left me discouraged, even though I'm good at planning and saving. Now I am less judgmental of others, and this was carried through with other reflections as well. In terms of having the money conversation, speaking about money with my mom, who's white, and my stepfather, who's African American, was enlightening. While they both came from families of 6, they grew up with entirely different life circumstances. Access to information about financial resources and knowledge seemed to be a key difference. And this takes us back to the issues about some of the person in context, institutional constructs that affect the experiences that people have. And then finally, obtaining my credit report. I thought this was an interesting quote that I wanted to pass on. This assignment crystallized my view that those in power have developed a system that people must understand in order to accumulate wealth, but the system is so complex you need experts to explain it, services that largely come with a cost. Using the metaphor of a poker game, the buy-in to even participate is so high, people are totally excluded without the opportunity for real gains. And this was a response to reading through their credit report and trying to understand it. So I think this is good information for us to be thinking about for the future. And so I'm going to wind up now with some course evaluation comments. This was a short course, so what we found very interesting, and again, this was similar comments we found across our course, across the classes that we taught, and that is that it should be a 3-credit hour course, and you could probably tell from what I've been talking about, there is a lot to convey, a lot of information, but it's also that it's an important subject for social workers to know. The second quote is that I gained more practical and applicable skills in this 1-credit hour class than I've gained from several 3-credit hour classes. I believe the skills in this class should be required of all social workers. So a 3-credit hour that's required, and then finally, this financial coursework should be integrated in the foundation curriculum for all social work students. It broke down things that working adults are expected to know and understand, but very rarely learn in a formal, easily understood manner. So this, we've also heard this from faculty who've included this in other standalone courses. So I think that to wind up, this really stresses the importance of bringing this topic back into the social work curriculum and adding it as an educational component in however way that folks can do that in their coursework. So I'm going to stop there and turn it back over to Gina, for questions or comments.
And the participant lines are muted so people can type their questions into the chat box.
We've gotten a couple of questions along the way.
We will have I'm answering one question about will the PowerPoint be sent to us. We actually will have it online on our website as recorded on our website.
Right. It'll be on our website, and the easiest way to find it is our CSD website and then financial capability. But what you're actually, the page you're looking for will be the FCAB Educational Resources page. And we can send that information out.
Yeah, and we can type it in here in a minute. Well, we'll come back to that. I'll do that after I turn this over. Any other questions before we move on to Denise?
Just Julia's typing.
Okay.
So we'll get the typing. Okay.
What ideas do we have for incorporating this content into an existing course structure? Yes, we understand about creating new courses. So we do have some folks who have incorporated this content into the curriculum, and I believe that I don't want to step on our toes of Julie Birkenmeyer, but she will be talking about that a little bit later in this webinar. And if that's not enough information, we can get you some more information. This information is for persons with difficulty managing sufficient, but not people who do not have sufficient resources. Correct? I would say this is for both. I think the issue is how can you budget? How can you think about how to manage your funds in different ways? I think it's for folks who may have difficulty, but even if you do not have sufficient resources, there might be opportunities for fine-tuning and tweaking, especially thinking about that cash flow per week. You might be able to find ways to fine-tune how you're already managing your resources.
The other, can I just add, this is Margaret, is that not only are we teaching social work students to engage directly with clients, but also to engage with systems change. And so for many clients who are short on resources, how can we improve that economic situation for them? So we do address that in the curriculum, and we really welcome your participation in that process and identifying key ways to change systems.
Hi, Valandra. This is Gina. We met through the phone. I'm glad that you were on the call. It's a short course, and it's 5 weeks. And each class session is 3 hours long. But it's a skill lab, so it's just a 1 credit hour course. And there are other examples of people that have created a full course, as well as examples of people that have taken the approach to integrate and infuse into existing classes like practice, policy, research, and field education.
Great. All right. I think we will turn it over now to Denise. And thank you, Denise.
Yes, thank you. Thanks, Lissa. Thank you, Margaret. Thank you, Julie. And thank you, Gina. I'm delighted to be with each of you. On behalf of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, we are delighted to join you in your efforts to bring more financial empowerment, more financial capability, more financial asset building resources into the classroom and into the communities. I want to start my very first short time with you by following the great lead that Margaret and Lissa and Gina have done so far, and I know Julie will end with. And I want to share a very quick story with you. And by way of background, I've taught both at the undergraduate and graduate level and have had the privilege of training in this kind of material, I think it's honest to say, with people in all 50 states and Puerto Rico. Maybe not in each state, but through the various means, we've touched people everywhere. A couple of months ago, I had the privilege of being in Orange County, Florida. And of course, it's been hit by the storm. And I still can't get a response from my dear new friends in the Head Start community. I spent an entire day with 24 family social workers. Each of them had undergraduate degrees. 2 of them had graduate degrees in social work. And I spent the day training on the Your Money, Your Goals toolkit, which of course has been created by the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, and Lissa has referenced it many times. Throughout the day, we approached the work in this training as if they were going to use the material immediately with Head Start families. They are charged to develop, as you may know, family assessment plans, family development plans with every Head Start family, 1,500 Head Start families in this Orange County area. And as we began the day in a very interactive way, Money and Me and a lot of different interactive exercises, by the time we got done, we had them actually practice what it would be that they would do with their Head Start families. And the toughest thing for a social worker, I have learned humbly, is many of them have been trained in this material, but then when they start to work with clients, they freeze because they don't know how to bring up the money conversation. How do they bring up the money conversation in a way that keeps the door open and not closed, that is avoiding of judgment and of kind of a looking down, you know, all those things that happen in the field or in any field, frankly. And so in the process of our work together, we had them actually write down what their dreams were, what their goals were, that were both short-term and long-term, that had anything to do with money. And they had to do this for themselves. We had them write down what their needs and their wants and their obligations were exactly as they saw it themselves, and how that would affect the spending side of their cash flow budgets. We had them write down their financial emergencies that are very different than irregular bills. So, for example, a car tire that goes out is an emergency, but the school that starts every year in school supplies is really an irregular bill. So we had them actually write down all these exercises for themselves. Then we had them think about how to talk about these things with clients. How do you bring up the money topic in a way that keeps the door open? By the end of the day, I would say honestly, half of them said to me personally, I wished I could have learned this as a young person. I wished I could have learned this in college. I wished I could have gotten this in graduate school. It could have helped my family get to where we wanted to be, stay out of trouble, and it would have helped us be able to work with our clients. Then the next day I had the privilege of spending a half a day with the Head Start parents. And we approached it around goal setting. What are your dreams? What are your goals? What do you want for yourself? What did you learn about money as a child? Back to Lissa's point. What do you want for yourself in your child around money? And now where do we start today? Very, very action-oriented. At noon, we had each of them write down their goals, their emergencies, their irregular bills, their hopes, their dreams, their needs, their wants, their obligations, their cash flow, how they could move their money around and make ends meet, their debt. We taught them the snowball method of how to reduce debt. And at noon, when I had to go to the airport, not one Head Start parent left the room, even though the thing was over. And I understood from others that that session went on another full hour to an hour and a half, that people are desperate for this information and they want to be able to learn it for themselves, apply it to their own families, their own student situations, and then carry it forward. I share that story with you because it is so hot off the press and it taught us so much about how to do this work. Now, what I want to do right now is I want to be able to share with you a little bit more about the background of these materials that you can take and that are available to you and to use. And the first thing I want to do is I'm having trouble moving the screen, Ben, for some reason. If you can make me a host again, I can't move the slide. So, Ben, I'm going to ask you if you could please move the next slide, please. So let's go on and just say that when you use the materials, there's a disclaimer. And the disclaimer basically says that you're not giving financial advice. These are materials made by a third party. They are nothing more than educational materials, and you're fine in using them. So let's go to the next slide, please. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is independent, and this is another disclaimer you'd want to use. Let's go to the next slide, please. I'm just having a technology issue. The CFPB works in 3 different areas: empowerment, enforcement, and education. And one of the things that you need to know is that we're doing education right now. As you would do this work or use it, of course, it's in the education area. But the enforcement area, about almost $15 billion has been returned to consumers from banks and credit card companies, et cetera, who've not followed the law. We'll just say it that way, and have gotten into some trouble and have been taken, challenged around that. Empowerment is what the work is all about. Let's go to the next slide, please. 11.9 billion have received relief. 29 million have received relief because of actions. 1.2 million complaints have been handled from consumers, and 97% of consumers get a timely response from companies after submitting a complaint. Next slide, please. You should know that the Office of Financial Empowerment is who's created these materials, and there aren't very many of them, and they hope and dream to work with you as an intermediary in getting them out. Let's go to the next slide, please. These are where you can sign up for different listservs and being able to get information. We'll make this all available to you, and let's go to the next slide, please. All right, now I want to go over this orientation to the toolkit quickly. Let's go to the next slide, please. And I want to say, in our practice, all the technology worked great. I don't know what's going on right now, but this is what the toolkit looks like. And 18,000 and running have been trained all over the country. Big systems like USDA Cooperative Extension, United Way. I'm so grateful to the Center for Social Development and to our colleagues for having brought it to you. But all over the country, community-based organizations, legal aid attorneys, workers, unions, lots and lots of people throughout the country have been trained. Let's keep going, please. There are other resources that are available to you, and if I was in your shoes, I'd want to know about these. So there is a brand new resource that's out on reentry. So you work with young people and younger people and older people who are working with people who have come out of prison. There's a lot in there. We're training HUD tomorrow for the first time, this huge JRAP program about how to take these materials and use them in so many issues for people coming out of prison. We have another guide focusing on Native Americans. And we have another one that's just come out, the Focus on Persons with Disabilities, that really deals with the ABLE Act, the ABLE accounts, how do you buy and purchase assisted devices, some of the things that are really attentive to persons who have disabilities. Let's go to the next slide, please. This is where you get all of your Money Your Goals materials. It's on the landing page, and you can order these materials directly for yourself and your communities. And again, that's because of the partnership we have with the Center for Social Development. Next slide, please. And there's an issue-focused set of materials that are brand new, in about a year ago, and newer coming out. The one on the right is called Behind on Bills. It's a lovely spiral-bound book that starts with my money picture in the back. It goes to goal setting. It goes to tracking income, what comes in and what comes out. It goes to how to really pay bills on time, how to prioritize the bill paying process so that people aren't in trouble and can still keep their basic needs. It goes through how do you submit a complaint. It goes through what happens when you have a debt collector. And then on the left-hand side, there are the companion guides. There's a toolkit. The toolkit is in English and Spanish. And again, all the slides are going to be available to you, not just the slide for this webinar, but I want you to hear this. There's a slide deck that goes with the toolkit that is very long, very robust, and underneath each slide are all the talking points, the exercises, the timing, and know that every exercise, can be cut in half for sure, depending upon your context and your circumstance. Let's go to the next slide, please. Now, on the website, there's a way to tell your story. And if we can go to the next slide, I want to tell you this is something really, really important. This woman is a Head Start parent from Detroit. She's part of the CAP agency there. And the CAP agency is doing great work in financial capability, some of the best I've seen in the country, to be honest. And this woman was told by a debt collector that she was going to go to jail. And, of course, that's illegal. And it got reported, and action was taken, and this woman is fine. So there's a way that you can tell your social workers, we want you to get online. We want you to be advocates. We want you to tell stories. We want you to submit complaints so that, A, you can be a good advocate, B, we can see if there's a lot of bad actors in a certain region, and C, the force of the CFPB can go to work and get its job done. Let's go to the next slide, please. The orientation of the toolkit is important. Next slide, please. It's broken down into 4 different parts, and introductory, the CFPB, emotions, money, culture, how to bring up the money conversation. And the next slide, please. The one thing I want to point out to you is that there's a financial empowerment self-assessment. And any staffer and any faculty member and anybody working in the field, I have yet to find somebody who is not benefiting from taking this self-assessment. And it goes through all the different money topics, and it goes through the right answers, and it tells you where to go in the toolkit to get more information. And to the person, to the training, I have learned that people know about money, but there isn't one of us that can't learn more. I don't care how smart any of us is. The market is changing so much. Also, I'm learning that in the financial empowerment self-assessment, the second part of the assessment, many people are using with clients. And same is true with my money picture. It's an assessment to use with the clients to find out where they're at, what they need, and where to start. Go to the next slide, please. Then it's broken down into goal setting, savings, tracking what comes in, paying bills or what goes out, getting through the month, dealing with debt, credit reports and scores, money services, cards, accounts, and loans, and then finally protecting your money, and all the consumer laws are in one place. Next slide, please. Now, these are some tools I want to quickly go over. Goal setting tool, planning for life events like getting cancer or losing a job or getting a divorce or all the things that happen in life that none of us plan on. Buying a car. And then a savings plan, savings and benefits. What do you do when the asset limits are tight and you can't save? And yet, I have yet to find $500 set aside will not mess with benefits anywhere. Nobody has yet reported to me or us that $500 or $250 is going to really hurt public benefits. Finding a safe place for saving, increasing your income through tax credits, bringing in the earned income tax credit at the federal level and the state level. And then finally, the income and resource tracker, ways to receive income. What happens if you don't have a bank account? How do you get paid? And if you lose the payroll card, then what happens, right? Ways to increase your income and resources legally. And then we get to the spending tracker, using a calendar instead of a chart. Ways to pay bills, especially if you don't bank. Strategies for cutting expenses. What do you do when cash is short? How do you know what bill to pay first? And then finally into cash flow that Lissa pointed out. How to make ends meet every week of the month. How to use a calendar if you hate using a chart. And improving the cash flow checklist. Let's go on to the next slide. These are all worksheets or tools that you can pick and choose, that you could train on every single one of them. And or you can just take a few topics. And then we get into the next one, it's on debt. So how to track debt, how to know what the debt to income worksheet is. I mean, how do you know what the debt to income is? How to reduce debt, how to repay student loans, and what do you do when debt collectors call? How do you get your credit report safely and avoid all the ads? How do you fix it? How do you keep records, especially when there's crisis all the time? And then finally in money services, it always starts with what do you need? Not what do we think you need, what do you need around financial services and products? And then how do you choose the right financial institution? And how do you open an account? What do you need? We can't believe how many frontline staff don't even bank anymore. What do you need to open an account? And then what if you send money abroad? What are the rules around all that now? And how do you submit a complaint to the CFPB if there's been some horrible, identity theft issue or some kind of financial abuse? And how do you protect your identity? And what are the red flags you want to listen to? And what are all the consumer laws? So if we go on to the next slide, please, then the thing I wanted to just point out is that all the slides are free and all the instructions are there for you. And let's go to the next slide, please. We're just going to keep moving quickly. The facilitator notes are there. Let's go to the next slide, please. And you can see all the notes are underneath each individual slide. It's very simple. Keep going to the next slide, please. This is an example of a 30-minute session. It uses Vote with Your Body. It's a small group exercise, and it's in Module 4. Keep going to the next slide, please. Keep going to the next slide, please. Now, these are the methodologies that are used. So, I've been in the classroom a lot. I've been in community-based settings a lot. And I know, and you know, how important it is to be really interactive, especially with adult learners. And even in the context you're in. So we've got icebreakers, we've got presentations, facilitated discussions, brainstorming, individual activities, large group and small group exercises, exercises in pairs, carousel exercises where people get up and move around, contests, scavenger hunts, role plays, skits. Some people like them, some people hate them, but there's a lot of role plays that are involved with the client, the staffer, and an observer. So that's kind of real time, like a real setting, tool analysis, and voting with your body. Let's go to the next slide, please. All right. We'll go to the next slide, please. All right. Now, all these interactive exercises go along with the toolkit. So, for example, in the beginning, we have people do Money and Me, and it's a brainstorming exercise around what are all the associations people have with the word money. And you wouldn't believe what comes up. There are cultural, and there are religious, and there are gender differences, and there are millennial and World War II differences, and there are rural and urban differences, and there are ethnicity differences. And so we try to get at what are the differences, what comes up for us, which is judgment, and how do we avoid that and make room for the woman who needs to really have a pedicure and a manicure because she's going to go to the parent-teacher conference and she doesn't want to be any different than any other middle-class parent. All these things that come up. We have a debate. Should you or should you not bring up financial empowerment among service providers in the direct work we're doing? We have the scavenger hunt that goes with the toolkit. We have creating a referral guide and building a chart. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. All right, then we've got all kinds of interactive exercises. Let's go back. We need to go back just a couple of slides, and I'm so sorry about this technology issue I'm having here for the first time. Let me just say this, that maybe I can just hold with the slides for a minute because they're not working so well. Let me just say that there are interactive activities for every single module in the toolkit. And in the interactive activities, you can add to them and use a financial coaching approach. In other words, you can have people write down their own needs and wants and obligations. You can have them write down their own savings, emergencies, and irregular bills. You could have them actually do for themselves what they would do with a client. And in each of the topics, for example, there's an exercise I want you to know about called Shauna. Shauna's got a first job. She could have been one of your undergraduates who gets a first job in a hospital, right? And it goes through all of her debts, her school loans, her credit card debts. And then she wants to buy a car, right, because she can't get to work. There's no public transportation. But if she gets that car, her debt-to-income ratio is going to be higher. It's going to be a lot higher than is what is should be, you know, for her own serenity, right? So then what happens is it teaches her, first thing is how to lay out her debts. Secondly, how to determine which debts she needs to pay first so that she can buy that car she needs to go to work. It forces her to make these decisions and trade-offs. It then teaches her how to do the snowball method of reducing debt by paying off the lowest credit card first and then the second credit card next. It also teaches her how to pay off the highest interest rate next. And so she'll use the one exercise, or you can use the one exercise to track debt, to see what the debt-to-income ratio is, and to reduce the debt. And it's all one person in one scenario, a normal social worker situation and a normal client, frankly, in a very low-wage job. That's the kind of thing that's done with the toolkit. The same is true with Raphael. Melissa showed you the chart of all the cash flow, making ends meet every week. Well, it's really easy to take the inputs, put them in the chart so people learn how to do it, and then they have to learn how to move the bills around so that they're in the black every week instead of every month. They move their bills around, they negotiate with the landlord, and they bring in more resources so that they're always in the black and not going off of credit cards, not going to payday lenders, etc., to make ends meet. So the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau's got a fabulous website, consumerfinance.gov. And in that website, there are materials that are for the practitioner for you. You're not a practitioner, you're professors, but some of you are practitioners and you're training practitioners. So there's all kinds of things in there. We've got a brand new research product that's come out of the CFPB on how to measure financial capability. We have lots in there for new immigrants. When you submit a complaint to the CFPB, and again on any kind of issue, there's a database that you can go to on the website, go to your zip code, and you're going to see all the bad actors that have been complained about in your area. If the students learn how to do this, they can help clients avoid situations that are going to be harmful. There's a lot in there on mortgages, student loans, buying a home, remittances. There's just so much available to you that if you go to consumerfinance.gov and go right underneath the banner, you can go into the research that's being done, all the financial education materials that are available to adults and to youth and to children. That's all there for you free. And the one thing I love the best is called Ask the CFPB. And in asking the CFPB, you're going to see all the questions that have come in from the field. And those questions are on any kind of money topic you can imagine. You know, car loans that are like at 30% interest rates, and all kinds of issues on mortgages and loans and student loans and all kinds of things. And about half of them have been translated into Spanish. So the complaints can be taken in 184 different languages, right? So that is really an important resource for you. So what we've tried to do in the short time I've got with you is to say, Your Money, Your Goals is a big toolkit. It's really big, and it's available to you in English and Spanish. There's a training deck that goes along with it. There's interactive exercises you can use in the classroom or inside of a course, or if you're in a community-based setting. There's a variety of other materials that are free to you to go to the website while they all exist, and they do right now, and just log in and get them sent to you. You can get them for your classrooms, and if those young people, which they are, they're all being placed, they can take these materials and learn how to train with them, and they can use some of these exercises even with the clients that they're working with. So I'll stop right now and turn it over to our dear colleague, Julie, unless there may be some questions or comments that come into the chat function. And Gina and Lissa, if you could read them, I'm happy to respond. Otherwise, we'll be able to move on to Julie for your part of the agenda. Any questions or comments? Okay, I thank you for your time.
Typing.
Denise, hold on one second. You've got a couple of questions coming in. The
All
first
right.
one, are the materials free?
Free.
Is there a paper copy of the toolkit?
You see the other one? Is there a paper copy of the toolkit?
Yes, you can get a paper copy of the toolkit sent, and you can get electronic copies of the toolkit. And what we can do, Gina and Lissa and Margaret and Julie, is we can send a good link to each of you to get these materials. And we ask, they're very expensive to be made. Just get what you need, right? But get them. Do order them because they're there and available.
Yeah. And hi there, this is Ben. I'll paste a copy of that link into the chat function so everybody can just grab it and put it in a safe place on their computer and use it to order those materials.
Denise, there's one more question there from Julia. Any plans for gearing a special version to young people or new college grads dealing with student loans?
There's a lot on the CFPB website on student loans. There's a really great interactive that's all free. It's all free and available. It's not a paper. It's really an interactive website. It's linked inside the CFPB's website on student loans. With regards to the Your Money, Your Goals toolkit itself, in this moment, there are no plans to create it for young people. However, I must say that Behind on Bills and the other materials that are coming out are so easy to use that they are being used as we speak with 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21-year-olds in the foster care system. And I must say very successfully. And they're very focused, and the training is easy. And I would say Behind on Bills in this moment would be a great resource for young people. With regards to college age, we're learning that the college age students, this toolkit is written at 6th grade. It's plain language, so it's at 6th grade reading ability. And we know for a fact that college students are using this throughout the country. So I don't know that anything different has to be created for college students. On the student loan thing, though, I would just go into the website and look at in the financial education area, and the interactive tool that they've got there would be a couple of resources. Ben, are you aware of anything else on student loans?
No. The tool on student loans that's found in the main toolkit is the main thing that occurs to me related to that subject.
Okay. All right.
Okay, Denise, thank you. Our next speaker is Julie Birkenmeyer. Julie? All right.
Yes, Tina. Thank you so much. I must say I love the CFPB, and I really appreciate Denise's presentation. Their toolkits are fabulous. I really encourage everybody to take a look at them. My piece of the presentation today is to talk a bit more about curricular approaches and resources for social work educators. I've been doing education on FCAB-related material in social work education for, I would say about 5 years or so, and I've had the privilege of teaching whole courses at the MSW and the BSW level. And so I'd be happy to talk with folks or answer questions about 3-credit courses at any point. It's not the focus today, but I just wanted to put that out there for you to think about. So in particular, I'm going to talk a bit about the CSWE Curricular Guide for Economic Wellbeing Practice as a resource, as well as the Economic Wellbeing Clearinghouse. I'll talk more about that. I'll spend a few minutes also talking about the Education Policy and Accreditation Standards, or EPOS, and FCAB curricular content and the extent to which FCAB curricular content can fulfill EPOS guidelines. And then I'll finish up talking about FCAB resources for social work educators. So several years ago, CSWE agreed that perhaps social work educators may appreciate and find useful more resources for teaching additional content in social work education on economic well-being and FCAB, and received generous support from the New York Community Foundation and the Kazanskin Foundation to begin work in that area. The culmination of that project is at least 2 work products. One is the Curricular Guide to Economic Wellbeing Practice, and the other one is a clearinghouse, which I'll discuss in just a few minutes. The Curricular Guide is a guide for generalist as well as specialist curricula in the area of economic well-being. It is a free, downloadable e-publication off of their website. So if you Google CSWE Economic Wellbeing Clearinghouse as well as the Curricular Guide, these resources will come up for you. And it's a really great resource to kind of get started. If you're relatively new to thinking about FCAB specifically or economic well-being more generally, it's a great way to start. And the guide provides a nice framework for approaching FCAB content in social work education within economic well-being. So one of the questions that sometimes we get is this idea that, is dealing with personal finances or household finances really a part of social work? That seems like to some people it might be kind of outside our professional boundaries. And as Margaret suggested at the very beginning, it's been part of social work practice throughout the duration of the time we've been a profession, but it's kind of waxed and waned in terms of emphasis. And so I'm going to guess some faculty and some program directors and deans, et cetera, that are still kind of thinking about this as whether or not it fits. And the Curricular Guide does a nice job of beginning to frame FCAB work within this general idea of economic justice, which is certainly contained in the CSWE EPOS. So it provides a framework for thinking about how FCAB can fit into the larger framework of what we do think as part of our profession, including workforce and career development, economic justice work, et cetera. And it defines economic well-being as including FCAB curricular content and practice, and it kind of situates FCAB practice within this larger framework, and then can kind of facilitate the integration of FCAB into social work education and into social work profession. So this document provides definition and scope of practice, is including income, financial security, financial stability, sense of well-being, and it discusses economic well-being and then also FCAB within social work history as well as contemporary practice. It also has a wonderful resource that I'll talk about in just a bit, where it maps our EPOS across these economic well-being components and gives lots of ideas about ways in which you could a program could map their EPAS and include more FCAB content as well as content in these other economic well-being areas. So just to reiterate, this is a free resource. It's downloadable from their website, and I encourage you to take a look at it as a place to kind of get started. I know in many programs, there's a curricular committee that deliberates and approves content, perhaps to even include the integration of content into existing courses. And it's a great resource for folks to provide those committees to help them think more about it and become more educated about ways to approach this content within a larger curricular discussion. The other resource I wanted to mention as we get started on this last piece is the Clearinghouse for Economic Wellbeing. This is a second product that came out of the larger CSWE Economic Wellbeing project. It's another wonderful resource. It's not anywhere close to the CFPB toolkits, but it is a great start to try to get some very tangible resources that have been created by other social work faculty out into the larger social work education community. At this point, there's over 60 resources in this clearinghouse. So if you went to the clearinghouse, you'd see that there is a search structure where you can search by course type, you can search by competency, and there's a few other functions as well. And in the clearinghouse available to you for free is course syllabi on both short courses, as Melissa was talking about earlier, as well as the 3-credit courses that I've taught. They're all up there. There's also teaching modules from faculty that have included specific topics within other courses that might be helpful if people are thinking about, maybe introducing a module that addresses this content more specifically. There's readings and bibliographies that are up there, so readings that people have used in a wide variety of courses, from research courses to practice courses to policy courses that relate to finances. There's also in-class exercises that people have created, and some of them dovetail with the media tools. So I know one of the resources I suggested that's in the clearinghouse is Robert Reich's movie, I guess it's really a documentary, related to income inequality. And it's a wonderful resources around how do you facilitate class discussion, or perhaps use that as the fodder for a class assignment to have students reflect on their learning on income inequality and wealth inequality. And there's other in-class exercises that have been used as well. And then finally, class assignments. Alyssa talked about some of the assignments that they assign for their short course. I know the assignments that I've used in my longer 3-credit class are also available. And there's a kind of a wide variety that are up there. And I will say this, we are certainly, I believe, CSW is very open to adding additional resources or hearing from faculty what resources would be helpful as you think about how to integrate this content into your curriculum. What kinds of resources beyond the ones that are there would really be helpful? The call for curricular resources went out about 2 years ago or so, and so it may be that faculty needs are changing in terms of resources. So please do let them know what is useful and maybe what you would find even more useful when thinking about integrating content, whether it's integration into courses or creating short courses, creating 3-credit courses, possibly even creating continuing education efforts or extracurricular type of offerings that are optional for students and others. So what kinds of resources would be helpful would be good to know. I will say also that not only are these resources free and available for faculty, you can certainly modify any of them that you would like. They're included in each resources is the name of the faculty who submitted it. So if you have more questions about it or want to have a dialogue with the creator of these resources, you're more than welcome to do that and go from there. So I'm going to transition a bit to talk a bit, about EPAS and FCAB curricular content. Again, Education Policy and Accreditation Standards is the framework for social work education. And there's several resources with examples, as I just mentioned, the Curricular Guide for Economic Well-Being. Toward the end of that document, there's a map of the CSWE EPAS competencies, the 9 competencies, and their associated behaviors with all kinds of examples of ways that you can demonstrate those behaviors through both financial as well as economic behaviors, and then some ideas of assessment, and those are also mapped to the dimensions of each of the competencies, which we'll talk about in just a moment. So that Curricular Guide for Economic Well-Being has examples that are broader than FCAB. So it can include, a mapping on of examples with economic well-being, economic justice, workforce and career development, some of those other components to economic well-being. But they do also include examples of FCAB. So those are there for you to take a look at. At the risk of a bit of self-promotion, the forthcoming FCAB textbook will also have a good resource for demonstrating how the competencies and behaviors can be met through FCAB content. As mentioned, the textbook will be coming out, we believe, in the middle to late spring of 2018. It will also have an accompanying website from the publisher. Oxford is the publisher of the textbook, and they will be a wonderful resource, we hope, that will help instructors with using that textbook with an EPAS, again, map of the competencies, the behaviors that relate to FCAB, and associated with each of the chapters of the textbook. So that'll be available for folks who really want to drill down and use FCAB-related material with their EPAS. I also mentioned I'll be doing, along with a team of other faculty, a presentation, an e-poster presentation at the upcoming CSWE in October on this topic. So one of the reasons we've been putting a lot of effort into doing this mapping on is that we've heard from faculty anecdotally that are working in this area, trying to introduce more FCAB content into their curriculum, that they don't really have a lot of space in their curriculum for maybe a new course, and so they're thinking about this idea of maybe integration, and the mapping of EPAS with FCAB curricular content can help faculty think about, okay, if I am meeting specific competencies and maybe specific behaviors in my class, is there a way that I can still do that and maybe substitute some FCAB content for this content and have it still meet the same competency and behaviors or dimensions of competencies that this course does at this point. So it can facilitate replacement of content. For example, if there's a particular case that is used in a practice course that demonstrates a specific, competency and dimension of a competency, et cetera, perhaps introducing some modifications to that case that has more of an emphasis on working with the client's finances or her economic well-being, maybe more in general even. There might be a way to make those substitutions so that it's not a grand overhaul of a course, for example, but it's a substitution of the content currently being covered, and perhaps doing more emphasis and teaching and skills-based teaching around finances with clients. Okay, so let me move forward and show you an in-depth example of this mapping on idea. So this is an example of mapping on FCAB content on competency 3. which is the competency that addresses human rights and justice. And so as you can see, as you might recall, there are 4 dimensions: knowledge, values, skills, and cognitive and affective processes, which has been shorthanded here because it's very long. And so you can see that you can demonstrate these dimensions using FCAB content. So in terms of knowledge, if your course, perhaps a diversity course or a course that integrates diversity in some way, uses the dimension of knowledge, you could think about students demonstrating their knowledge about universal rights of inclusion, about basic human rights, and that might include inclusion into financial systems, so the banking system, being able to have a safe place to store their money that's insured, et cetera. In terms of values, students can demonstrate their support for the right for people to engage in collective and individual action to achieve inclusion in financial systems. So that gets at what Margaret was mentioning earlier, this idea that we need to also encourage students to be involved in addressing systematic injustices that lead them to be, in this case, financially excluded. Skills, advocating for local banks and credit unions to offer affordable and safe banking products. And then cognitive and affective processes, developing self-awareness of one's comfort in discussing systematic and policy context that supports or opposes a client's financial inclusion. So how comfortable are students talking about the roots of some of these problems that lead to financial exclusion? This next slide does not do as deep of a dive, but gives you more of an overview of just other examples of ways you can map on EPAS and FCAB content, and perhaps again substitute some content that currently covered in the course with a course that with content, that has more of an FCAB or a financial emphasis. So competency 1, dealing with ethical behavior. If you wanted to address the dimension of cognitive and affective process, which is at CAP, students could practice self-awareness of one's comfort level in discussing clients' finances. Competency 2 addresses diversity, the knowledge dimension, display understanding of historical events, shaping client finances, including the impact on generational wealth and asset building. Competency 6, engagement. A skill might be to demonstrate engagement while screening for public benefit eligibility. So how do students screen and ask questions while also being concerned with this idea of engagement? Competency 4, the assessment of value, would be recognizing the importance of environmental resources and supports in building financial management skills. And competency 8, having to do with intervention. A knowledge dimension would be demonstrating knowledge of the time value of money and the usefulness of that information to a client. Really help clients understand that savings is not just important for having your money in a safe place, but also there's this idea that perhaps it may in fact generate interest or dividends, and this time value of money is at the root of those ideas. Okay, so on this last slide, I'm going to talk just a bit about other resources that you might think about as you consider maybe integrating some of this content into your curriculum. The American Academy of Social Work and Social Welfare has 2 grand challenges that relate to FCAB. One is reducing extreme economic inequality, and the other one is financial capability for all, which provides some more of this background information that could be helpful. Gina has talked a little bit about the FCAB initiative at the Center for Social Development, and this provides you with a hyperlink to see all the different resources that are there from CSD. And I've been mentioning quite a bit the Economic Wellbeing Initiative from CSWE, and this is a link to that clearinghouse that I mentioned. Again, the clearinghouse is a place for those resources, as well as the curricular guide is available from the clearinghouse. And the CFPB, Your Money, Your Goals link, and Margaret mentioned earlier the National Foundation for Financial Education, which also has some wonderful resources around financial education. And then finally, the University of Maryland School of Social Work has a financial social work initiative, which is a wonderful place for some resources. It's also a place for social work scholars interested in this area of research and teaching to be able to connect with one another. All right, so I've come to the conclusion of my section. I'm happy to answer any questions anybody may have at this point. All right.
Okay.
I will turn this back over to Gina.
Okay. Thank you, Julie. So before we end, there are a couple of things. Number one, we have an evaluation that we'd like you to complete if you would. We really would appreciate it. It really informs how we design our webinars. And so the link for that will be on the next slide. I also want to thank you, all of the participants, because hopefully you have a wealth of information that will help you make a decision about doing including some sort of FCAB information into your curriculum. I mean, I think that there's no argument that there is a need for this. And so if there's anything that we can do to help you, we're here for you. The next slide will be a slide of our contact information, but I'm going to leave it here for just a second so that you can click on that FCAB Webinar 2 survey, and that is the actual link. Give you an opportunity to do that. Okay. And I would like to also thank our presenters, Denise, Julie, Lissa, and Margaret, for taking the time to do this. As you can probably tell, we are very, very vested in this, and we believe in it, and we think that it's extremely important. So we have about maybe about 10 minutes. We'll leave it up for a couple of more questions if someone has one. Julie or Denise or Alyssa or Margaret, is there anything that you'd like to add before we go?
Well, this is Denise. One of the things I really appreciate about today, the fact that the CFPB can add its resources to your, very deep and very thoughtful approach, et cetera, is just to really know that I have to just say this quickly. If there's any way in which you can help these students submit complaints and tell their story, which is very simple to do, that gives the CFPB a lot of information about doing research and about doing intervention in its enforcement. And I want everybody to know how important it is that you are the eyes and ears on the ground and in your communities. And then secondly, when you look at these slides, at least from my part of the presentation, there is a training guide that's actually new and off the press, and it can help you narrow in on what to do when, where, how for the audiences and the time periods, and that's all available to you. You can get printed copies of that too. So when you go to the website that Ben put in the chat function here, there are so many other materials that I didn't have time to go over. Just really spend some time and really look at what's there. And then just to express gratitude, Julie, to you for your thoughtfulness, and listen, and Jean and Margaret for your thoughtfulness in the work that you guys do in the country. I know the CFPB is thrilled to be partnering with you because of A, who you are, and B, because of the reach those of you who are on the line have in each of your respective communities. So I just want to say that to you.
Thanks, Denise. I think on the contact information, you're not there, so we'll make sure that people have your contact information.
No worries. Yep.
I would. I'd like to also add, from our vantage point, this entire project has been an enormous partnership across many different organizations, people, schools of social work. There's been contributions across the country to the curriculum, and we really want to thank everybody for all of that. And also to mention that there is a great deal of research going on in schools across the country about FCAB, about economic inequality, And so not only are these curricular resources available, but we can also help link you with researchers and others who are producing knowledge and materials about FCAB and economic issues.
Yeah. And to add to that, I know there are many of you who are researchers and interested in this. I will be sending an email, a thank you email to you, and I will include the link for the survey. But I will also give you a little summary of if you want to get engaged from a research perspective or policy or education with regard to FCAB. I'll provide information on how you can get involved. And we are planning to host a meeting at APM. So if you're APM, I'm sorry, APM. I'm sorry, not APM. I was talking about that organization earlier. But anyway, we'll send that information to you. We hope that you will get engaged with us. And I think that's all.
Maybe go back to the survey.
Okay, just for a second, I'll go back to the survey link and go from there. We have about 5 minutes if anybody has a last-minute question or thought. Thank you for your kind words. Those of you that sent us a thank you in our chat, we really, really appreciate that. Okay. Well, it doesn't appear that we have any more questions. Oh, wait a second. Michelle is typing a question. Or I did see it. Oh, okay. Oh, great. Michelle, we'll be in touch. All right. So with that, we'll end. And thank you so much. We know that you could have spent your time doing a lot of other things in this last 90 minutes, and we appreciate you participating with us. It means a great